I spent my whole life doing whatever she wanted and was loyal and totally under her control. But once she cheated and betrayed me, everything changed. In the dim light of his modest apartment, Sebastian sifted through the stack of papers on his desk, his fingers trembling slightly. Each document was a testament to his unwavering loyalty to Luna, a collection of years of dedicated service. As Luna's personal assistant, Sebastian had been the silent guardian of her life, privy to her secrets, her triumphs, and her rare moments of vulnerability. But tonight, everything had changed. The sound of the city outside his window was a distant murmur, like the fading whispers of his shattered trust. On his computer screen, an email glared back at him, its contents a stark revelation of Luna's infidelity. The words were like a knife, each sentence twisting deeper into his heart. He had stumbled upon it accidentally, or perhaps fatefully, while organizing her emails. A private exchange, never meant for his eyes, detailing an affair with a high-profile businessman. Sebastian had always seen Luna as more than his employer. She was his muse, his guiding star. He admired her brilliance, her charisma, her ability to captivate a room. In the cutthroat world of business, Luna was a titan, and Sebastian had been proud to stand by her side. His devotion was complete, often at the expense of his personal life. But to him, Luna's success was his success, her happiness his own. Now, that image lay in ruins. Rising from his chair, Sebastian paced the room, each step heavy with a mix of anger and sorrow. He had sacrificed so much for Luna, defending her against critics, handling her affairs with meticulous care, even overlooking his own needs. And all along, she had been deceiving him, betraying not just her partner but him as well, the one person who had been unconditionally loyal. The apartment, once a sanctuary of peace, now felt like a cage. Photos of Luna and Sebastian at various events adorned the walls, mocking him with their frozen smiles. He had believed in a lie, a facade. The realization stung, a relentless ache in his chest. As he stopped in front of a photo from their last business trip, a happier memory, his gaze hardened. The pain was morphing, giving way to a cold, burning anger. Luna had used him, played him for a fool. She had taken his loyalty and thrown it back in his face. Sebastian's mind raced, thoughts spiraling into darker territories. He had been at her mercy all his life, a willing pawn in her grand game. But no more. The trust he had for Luna was irrevocably broken, and with it, the bonds of his subservience. He returned to his desk, his eyes now steely with resolve. If Luna thought she could discard him so easily, she was gravely mistaken. He knew her secrets, her strengths, and crucially, her weaknesses. Sebastian had been the architect of her empire, and he knew every hidden doorway, every vulnerable cornerstone. A plan began to form, a scheme of such intricacy and depth that it would be worthy of the master strategist he had become under Luna's tutelage. It would be a revenge befitting the betrayal, a way to shatter the illusion Luna had so carefully constructed. Sebastian opened a new document on his computer, his fingers poised above the keyboard. The first line appeared on the screen, stark and unyielding. "It's time Luna learned the cost of betrayal." In that moment, the loyal assistant was gone, replaced by a man driven by a singular, chilling purpose. Luna's downfall would be his masterpiece, a cruel symphony composed by a heart scorned. The morning sun spilled into Sebastian's apartment, casting long shadows across the room where he had spent the night plotting. His eyes, red from a sleepless night, reflected a new, unsettling determination. The computer screen still glowed with the ominous words he had typed, a declaration of war against Luna. Sebastian had always been the unseen hand behind Luna's success. He knew every detail of her life, every deal she had struck, every ally and enemy she had made. As he sipped his coffee, the bitterness on his tongue mirrored the darkness clouding his thoughts. His plan was taking shape, a meticulous design to dismantle Luna's world piece by piece. The first phase was to undermine her professionally. Sebastian knew the intricacies of her business dealings, the delicate balance of relationships that kept her empire afloat. He would start by leaking confidential information to her rivals, subtle enough to avoid immediate suspicion but damaging enough to create cracks in her foundations. With a few well-placed emails and anonymous tips, he could trigger a chain reaction that would gradually erode her business credibility. But professional ruin was not enough. Sebastian wanted Luna to feel the same betrayal he had felt. He would target her personal life, turning her closest allies against her. Using his access to her communications, he began crafting and sending messages designed to sow discord among her friends and colleagues. Misinformation, half-truths, and outright lies were his weapons, and he wielded them with a cold precision. As he implemented his plan, Sebastian felt a sense of empowerment he had never experienced before. Each action against Luna was a strike back at the years he had spent under her shadow, a reclamation of his own agency. But with this newfound power came a creeping darkness, a part of himself he had never known. Over the next few weeks, Sebastian watched as Luna's world began to unravel. Business deals fell through, her network of allies started to crumble, and her once impeccable reputation was now marred with rumors and suspicion. From the sidelines, he observed her growing confusion and distress, a silent spectator to the chaos he had orchestrated. Yet, with each passing day, Sebastian's satisfaction was overshadowed by an unexpected emptiness. He had imagined that Luna's downfall would bring him a sense of justice, but instead, he felt a hollow void expanding within him. The more he hurt Luna, the more he seemed to lose a part of himself. Despite these nagging doubts, Sebastian pressed on. He convinced himself that this was the only way, that Luna deserved every ounce of suffering for her betrayal. But late at night, in the quiet moments before sleep, a small voice whispered in his mind, questioning the morality of his actions, wondering if this path of vengeance was truly the answer to his pain. As he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Sebastian realized that his quest for revenge had taken on a life of its own. He was no longer just seeking retribution for a betrayal, he was now entangled in a web of his own making, driven by a darker impulse that threatened to consume him. The chapter closes with Sebastian reflecting on the path he had chosen, a path lined with shadows and moral ambiguity. The seeds of retribution he had planted were growing, but at what cost to his soul? The once invincible Luna was beginning to crumble under the weight of unseen forces. Her empire, built with such care and precision, was now facing threats from all sides. Sebastian, from his concealed vantage point, watched as his meticulously laid plans began to bear fruit. Luna's days were now marred by a series of unfortunate events. Key business deals, which were once guaranteed victories, started to fall apart in inexplicable ways. Confidential information leaked, strategic partnerships soured, and her once loyal allies began to distance themselves. Luna, always so composed and in control, was showing signs of strain. Her sharp gaze often seemed distant, her confident stride a bit faltering. Sebastian had been thorough in his sabotage. He exploited every vulnerability, pulling at the threads of Luna's carefully woven tapestry. He knew her routine, her business operations, the personal dynamics within her professional circle. With a few keystrokes and well-placed calls, he had set a domino effect into motion, each piece falling perfectly as planned. But his vengeance didn't stop at professional ruin. Sebastian had always known that Luna's strength came not just from her business acumen but also from her network of personal relationships. He used this knowledge to further his scheme. Fake emails and messages, crafted with careful attention to Luna's tone and style, began to circulate among her friends and acquaintances. These messages, filled with fabricated confessions and requests, sowed mistrust and confusion within her inner circle. As Luna's personal and professional life began to unravel, her public image took a significant hit. Rumors and scandals, artfully orchestrated by Sebastian, started to appear in the media. The public, once so enamored by Luna's charm and success, now whispered about her fall from grace. Sebastian, meanwhile, struggled with the duality of his actions. He was the architect of Luna's downfall, yet he continued to play the role of the loyal assistant. He stood by her side, offering support, even as he orchestrated her undoing. This facade was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Each word of comfort he offered Luna was a bitter reminder of the chasm that had opened between them. Despite the success of his plan, a sense of unease began to grow within Sebastian. The thrill of revenge was waning, replaced by a creeping sense of guilt and doubt. He watched as Luna, once a beacon of strength and confidence, wilted under the relentless pressure. There were moments when he saw glimpses of the Luna he had once known, the woman he had admired and served so faithfully. These moments gave him pause, stirring a conflict within. One evening, as he sat in his apartment, Sebastian reflected on the journey that had led him here. He had started this path seeking justice, a way to right the wrongs done to him. But as he looked back, he saw a trail littered with moral compromises and questionable choices. The chapter ends with Sebastian gazing out of his window, the city lights below mirroring the turmoil in his heart. He had set out to destroy Luna, to make her pay for her betrayal. But in doing so, he wondered if he had also destroyed a part of himself, a part that once believed in loyalty, integrity, and the power of forgiveness. In the dim light of his office, Sebastian sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding before him. Luna's once unshakable empire was now teetering on the edge of collapse. Her public image was tarnished, her professional network fractured, and her personal life in disarray. The masterful web of destruction he had woven was complete, but the triumph he had anticipated felt hollow, replaced by a gnawing void within. As Luna struggled to salvage what remained of her life, Sebastian observed her with a complex mix of emotions. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, her facade of confidence and control now shattered. The sight stirred something unexpected in him, not satisfaction, but a deep sense of remorse. He had intended to right a wrong, to balance the scales for her betrayal, but the path he chose had led him down a dark, unrecognizable road. The office, once a place of strategy and ambition, now felt like a chamber of echoes, each one a reminder of his actions. Sebastian's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the man he had become. He had transformed from a loyal aide into an agent of vengeance, driven by a blind desire to make Luna pay for her deceit. In doing so, he had crossed lines he never imagined he would, betraying his own values and morals. Late at night, Sebastian would often walk the empty streets, trying to escape the turmoil in his mind. The city, with its indifferent rhythm, was a stark contrast to the chaos he had created. He wrestled with the duality of his existence, the caring, devoted assistant and the cold, calculating avenger. This internal struggle was exhausting, a constant battle between his conscience and his wounded pride. During these restless nights, Sebastian's thoughts drifted to moments he had shared with Luna. He remembered her laughter, her sharp wit, and the rare glimpses of kindness she had shown him. These memories conflicted with his current perception of her, blurring the lines between the victim and the villain in his narrative. One evening, as he walked along the riverbank, Sebastian's thoughts were interrupted by the sight of Luna's latest public statement on a nearby screen. She was addressing the recent turmoil, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a hidden sadness. As he watched her speak, Sebastian was struck by a profound realization: in his quest for vengeance, he had lost sight of the person he once admired. Returning to his apartment, Sebastian sat in the darkness, grappling with the magnitude of his actions. The revenge he had sought had consumed him, turning him into someone he no longer recognized. He had achieved his goal, but at what cost? He had hoped to find closure in Luna's downfall, but instead, he found only emptiness. The chapter closes with Sebastian gazing out of his window, the cityscape a blur of lights and shadows. He had reached a crossroads, torn between continuing down the path of revenge or seeking redemption for his actions. The man who had once been at Luna's mercy was now grappling with the consequences of his own merciless pursuit. Sebastian sat in his sparsely furnished apartment, the early morning light casting a pallid glow over the room. The streets below were silent, mirroring the quiet emptiness that had taken root within him. Luna's empire, once a towering monument to her brilliance and his dedication, was now a crumbling edifice, brought low by his methodical machinations. He had watched her struggle, a mix of pain and defiance etched on her face as she faced the relentless tide of scandal and betrayal he had unleashed. There had been moments, fleeting and fragile, when he had seen the Luna he once knew. But those glimpses were quickly swallowed by the reality of her actions, the betrayal that had ignited his quest for vengeance. Now, as he contemplated the ruins of their intertwined lives, Sebastian felt no satisfaction. The revenge he had sought, so consuming and absolute, had not brought the sense of justice he had craved. Instead, it had left a void, an emptiness that echoed with the remnants of his former self. Sebastian's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at his door. He knew without looking who it would be. Luna. He had anticipated this moment, part of him longing for it, another part dreading it. As he opened the door, he was met with the sight of Luna, her usual poise replaced by a vulnerability he had never seen before. Her eyes, once so full of fire and ambition, now held a plea for understanding, for forgiveness. They sat across from each other, the air thick with unspoken words and heavy with the weight of their shared past. Luna spoke first, her voice low and steady. She talked of regret, of the pain she had caused, of the love she had taken for granted. She sought forgiveness, a chance to rebuild what had been lost. Sebastian listened, his expression unreadable. He heard her words, the remorse in her voice, but they stirred nothing within him. The betrayal he had felt was too deep, the wounds too raw. He had dedicated his life to her, only to be cast aside for a fleeting affair. That betrayal had reshaped him, turned him into someone who could not, would not, find it in himself to forgive. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, devoid of the warmth it once held for her. He told Luna that some actions were unforgivable, that the trust they had shared was shattered beyond repair. He spoke of the path he had chosen, one that had irrevocably changed both their lives. Luna's plea turned to quiet acceptance, the reality of their situation settling in. There was no going back, no mending what had been broken. The chasm between them was too vast, the hurt too profound. As Luna left his apartment, the finality of their parting hung in the air. Sebastian watched her go, feeling a sense of closure, but not peace. He had chosen his path, driven by a need for retribution, and now he had to live with the consequences of that choice. The chapter closes with Sebastian alone in his apartment, the morning light now fully illuminating the room. He had achieved his revenge, but at the cost of his own inner peace. The man who had once lived at Luna's mercy had found freedom, but it was a freedom filled with solitude and the echoes of a past that could never be reclaimed.